Hello learners, welcome to this session for the Certificate in Fashion Design program. Today's topic we will be discussing the course 2 topic, which is basics of pattern making and sieving. I, Dr. Divya Ojha, welcome you to this session and hope that this session will be beneficial to you. Today's talk is all about methods and tools of pattern making, which is course 2 of CFDE program. So we will discuss what pattern is. So it is very important to know what pattern is and why it is important to know the term pattern. So it is very important to know pattern because all the garment construction and every part is depend on the pattern. First, it is explained that pattern making is a system of plotting body measurement on a flat surface. It is very clear from the sentence that for construction of a garment, first step what we do is we take a body measurement for whom we are constructing a garment. Then we transfer that body measurement on a flat surface. And that pattern is a template which is made of paper, and then from which part of the garment it is traced on the fabric before cutting and assembling. Then pattern are made for every different part of the garment. Like if we are designing a shirt, we design different separate pattern for the sleeve, we develop separate pattern for the front bodies and for the back bodies. In the same way, if we are making the skirt, we develop a different block or a pattern for the skirt, for the back portion and the front portion. So for every garment, it is very important to develop a pattern of each body part. Then lastly, pattern making is a highly skilled technique which call for a technical ability, design interpretation and practical understanding of the garment construction. If you are studying this fashion designing and if you are interested, it is very technical to know the pattern making, the steps or the skills, techniques which are involved in the making of a pattern. Because if you don't know how to develop a pattern and every technical aspect, you cannot develop a good garment. So pattern making is highly skilled technique which is in which you need a technical ability, design interpretation. If you are designing like you are designing a evening gown on a paper with a different types of colors, shades of color and fabric, so you should be very selection of the colors and the fabric for the final garment it should be very done very wisely, so your final product will be very good. So we can say pattern making is a highly skill oriented and you have to be technically able to design and interpret what your design or the final product should be. Then after knowing what pattern is, there are we should know how we have to develop the pattern. What are different methods of developing pattern? So there are 3 methods from which we can develop the pattern. First is the drafting method, second is flat pattern making, and third is the draping method. When we talk about the first method, which is the drafting, we all usually go for a stitching of a garment to the tailor's place. So there are what he does, he takes our body measurement and directly transfer that measurement on the fabric and cut, and then he gives we get the final product or our garment. So it is a 2-dimensional system of drawing pattern based on the body measurement. The most important thing for a garment or a pattern making is we have to take the body measurement, and in drafting can be done directly on the fabric. So for that we don't need to put the body measurement first on the paper, then we have to develop the block or the pattern and transfer on the fabric. We can directly take the body measurement and transfer it on the fabric, and then we can cut and go for the stitching and final product we can have. Then the second method for the development of pattern is flat pattern making. Flat pattern making is almost similar to the drafting method, but it has some technical skills we need in that. Flat pattern making is a system of plotting body measurement on a flat surface, as we have discussed earlier. So in this method, what we do, we take a body measurement, we take transfer that body measurement on a piece of paper or a pattern paper. Then we develop a pattern first on a paper. Then we use that pattern or the piece of paper for transferring the design on the fabric. So it creates pattern by making necessary changes in the already created basic blocks as per the design details. So what this says, when we have taken the body measurement and developed a pattern on a paper, and we are transferring that pattern on the piece of fabric, so we have a chance, or we have a ease to do some alteration, or we can add some our creativity or changes in that pattern. Like if we have created for a we have a pattern for some particular body measurement, and we want to develop a pattern, we want to design a garment for some other person. So we can adjust that pattern accordingly if we have that much of sense of manipulating that particular pattern. So this is about the flat pattern making. Then pattern maker uses various tools such as different type of scales there are, in which about these scales we will discuss in the tools and of pattern making. So pattern maker uses various tools such as scale, L-shaped scale, pattern master, French curve, notches, etc. to develop a pattern. The first pattern made is usually a body fitted sloper done on a thick cardboard. Like there is a thick cardboard on which we develop the pattern, and we use that cardboard or a sloper, or we say as a basic block for developing the garment on a fabric. So we can develop yoke, collar, sleeves, skirt, design can be created using the basic slopers. If we have created a basic sloper or block for every body part, like upper body or upper body's block, we have created a sleeve block, we have created a skirt block, we can use that standard blocks for the designing of different types of collars, different types of yoke on the garment. So many designs can be created by simply relocating the dart, or by converting the dart into various forms such as gathers, pleats, tugs, princess panel, etc. So there is a lots of chance to do creativity with the pattern making, especially with the flat pattern making. If we have the basic sloper, we can create, we can manipulate that sloper, we can manipulate the dart, and we can adjust the dart with the gathers or the pleats, and we can do lots of creativity with the flat pattern making. Then you can see these pictures. These are the pictures of some how flat pattern making is done. In the first picture, you can see the person has developed the sloper on the piece of paper or the cardboard. Then he is transferring that pattern on the fabric, and then he is cutting that piece of fabric, and then it will be stitched. So this was about the flat pattern making. And when we talk about the types of pattern, so basically there are three types of pattern we have in the fashion design, or when we go for the pattern making. So types of patterns, first is the basic pattern, which is also called as the sloper or the block, as we have discussed just now. So block, we have developed with a standard body measurement, and then they are made for making garment with same measurement. Like we have taken a measurement and we have developed a block or a sloper, and we use with that particular block or the sloper. It is a foundation that is used to make the pattern for design and has no seam allowance. Seam allowance means if we have taken the body measurement, when we go for the garment construction, we give some margin or seam allowance. Seam allowance means margin, like between the stitching line and the cutting line, because if we wear, our human body is not that much fixed, so we give some amount of ease, so person who is wearing feels comfortable in wearing that particular garment. So in basic sloper, it is just the basic with the particular exact body measurement what we have taken. There is no seam allowance given in that particular sloper. Then it comes the working pattern. Working pattern is which can be explained as a pattern that are made during the working of various techniques and before arriving to the final pattern. All necessary changes, like as we discussed in the basic pattern, there is no seam allowance, it is just the body measurement with the body measurement. But in the working pattern, what we can do, all the necessary changes we can do. We can slightly change to do the changes to adjust the certain body type. We can change the design according to our what design we have developed. We can experiment with that particular working pattern. We can manipulate the dart, we can adjust the dart, we can include gathers on the particular pattern, and also planning of finishing and details, like if we want to give, how much ease we want to give, how much seam allowance we want to give, and where we want to put the yoke, where we want to put the belt, style line, pocket, etc., and we can add on the working pattern only. Then the third pattern we have, it is the production pattern or the final product pattern we have, are the final pattern that are made on the basis of which the fabric is cut. When we have the basic pattern, then we got the working pattern on which we did the necessary manipulation and adjustment on the pattern. Then we have the final production pattern by which we will cut the fabric and design the garment. So these were the types of pattern we have. Then these are the basic blocks we have, like you can see for on the picture, first two is the basic bodies or upper block we have the skirt block, and accordingly we have the sleeve block. Similarly, these are made with the standard body measurement. Like if you go to buy a garment at some brand store, we get particular sizes, like we have the 28 size, we have then 30 size. So first what they do, they develop a basic pattern of a basic particular standard size, and they manipulate the size according, they do the grading of that particular pattern. So this is the basic bodice block or the basic blocks or the sloper we have to develop the final garment. Then there are some key features of flat pattern making which you should follow while we are developing or using the flat pattern making. So flat pattern making begins with the paper. First, this is very important to note because this is the basic difference between the drafting and the flat pattern making. That flat pattern making begins with the paper. All the measurements and the body landmarks are identified on the pattern paper. You will create a basic set of patterns including the basic bodies front, basic bodies back, sleeve block, skirt front, skirt back pattern, then test fit of all patterns on the dress form or a human body to check the balance and proportion and fit. What this says, when we have developed the pattern, basic sloper, what we do, we make a test garment which is not on the final fabric for which we are making the design or a garment. We make a test garment which is of muslin cloth. So we make a test fit garment and just give a human trial to check the proportion, fit and balance of the particular design. Once the test fit is done, you can easily use them to create a variety of design. And lastly, it is less time consuming method. So if it is said that we have developed a basic sloper of a standard size, so we can manipulate it according to the different body measurements, we can manipulate according to different design what we want to develop. So it is very less time consuming method. So this was all about the flat pattern making method. Then there are some pattern information which is very important for a designer. It is very important to mention all these information on a pattern, because if designer has developed pattern and it is transferred to the production department to do to design or to stitch in a bulk quantity, it is very important to give the pattern information on the pattern, so that the third person who is going to stitch or who is going to construct the garment, he or she should know what all requirement is needed. So first is name each piece, like each pattern piece need to be labeled. Like if it is the front part, just mention the front bodies, back bodies, where it is the all marking should be done appropriately. Then central front and central back lines should be mentioned on that. Numbers of pieces to be cut, like how many pieces of which part, like how many pieces of the skirt, how many pieces of the sleeves to be cut, it should be mentioned. Then fold line, these are the lines normally marked on the pattern where the left and the right side are identical, and half pattern is used to cut the complete garment part. Like there are different types of fold on the fabric, like the design should be on fold side, or it should be the like on the layout, which type of the layout of the fabric should be. Then balance mark, they are used to mark make sure pattern pieces and sewn together at the correct point. Then seam allowance, how much seam allowance, what amount of margin is to be given to construct the garment. Construction line, like dart, where the dart position should be, where the button hole should be, pocket placement, where should be the pocket, tucks, how much amount of the tucks should be there, pleats line, decorative stitch line, all the information or the construction line which you want on the garment, it should be mentioned very clearly. So this was the pattern information. Then there is one important thing which you should know before going to construct a garment or when you are using a fabric. So there is a grain line, what we say. So grain is very important to keep in mind while constructing a garment. So grain is a state or the direction in which the yarn is woven. Like if you see a fabric, it is generally woven, two yarns are interlaced, then we get a fabric and then fabric is developed. So the direction of the yarn, which two yarns are interlaced, it is said as the grain line. So generally we have the lengthwise grain, or it is said as the warp. So yarn parallel to the selvage. Selvage is the edge of the fabric. If you see a fabric, when you will notice now, if you take a piece of fabric, on one side you see a dark side, it is said as, it is look like a edge of that fabric. So edge of that fabric, edge is the technical term in the designing, it is said as the selvage. So yarn parallel to the selvage are known as the warp yarn, and the direction is known as the lengthwise grain. Most of the garment are cut in the lengthwise grain. So if you see, sometimes you wear a garment and it is not fitted on the body, you feel not that much comfortable. So this is because the fabric is not cut in the lengthwise grain, because on the crosswise grain the fabric gets stretched and we don't feel comfortable wearing that types of cloth. So the next is the crosswise grain. Yarn perpendicular to the selvage are known as the weft yarns, and direction is known as the crosswise grain. So the garment cut in the direction have more stretch. Like if you want to make a garment in which you want the garment to be stretchable, you should cut it into the crosswise grain, and less strength is compared to the warp yarns. Then bias grain. Bias grain, it represents a slanting or a diagonal line across the weave of the cloth. Like when we have a piece of square piece of fabric and cut it diagonally, at a 45 degree of angle, so it is at that piece of fabric is called as the bias grain, and it has the most almost very stretchable, and we generally use for making like skirts which we want to be more circumference. So this was about the some technical part of flat pattern making. Then the last method of pattern development is the draping. So draping is something very creative and very exciting part of pattern development. So draping is a three-dimensional method of preparing a pattern. It is an artistic approach in which the person develops a pattern by fitting clothes to curve of a dress form. Like in the flat pattern making, what we did, we took the body measurement, we transferred it on the piece of paper, then on the fabric. So on draping method, what we do, we directly do the fabric draping or the garment construction on the dress form. So dress form, we have you have seen, it is a type of like dummy we can say, or a mannequin we can say. It is a dress form of a particular of some standard human body measurement. So what we do, it is we take the fabric and directly start draping it on the dress form according to the design we have created. So in this method, one has the pleasure of seeing how the garment will look as a pattern develop. Like in the flat pattern making, we cannot visualize how our final product is coming out, but in the draping method, when you have the piece of fabric and you just start draping it according to the design on the dress form, you can see how the design is coming out, and at the same time, if you want, you can manipulate the design or you can change some technical thing what you want to do. So this is some images how draping is done. First, you have in the first picture, you can see you have a piece of fabric and a dress form, and you start pinning the fabric on the dress form according to the design, and the body landmarks are present on the dress form. According to following that body landmarks, you just put the fabric and start designing, and you can see that step by step you start draping the fabric. You just see how your design is coming out. It is also easier to create unconventional design with draping rather than the flat pattern making. Like if there is some type of design we see on some model we see, and how we imagine how this would have been created. So if there is some unconventional design, we just can't create it with the flat pattern making. So we create that particular design with the draping method. So draping is good technique to develop new ideas, and create new silhouettes. So draping technique helps to see proportion, fit, balance, design, features directly on the dress form. When we start the time we are designing or draping the fabric on the dress form, we can see how the fit is on the body, how from where balance is good or from where balance is not good, how design is coming out, and we can do changes at a time. So this is some pictures how draping is done and how final garment we get. Then the key features of draping are: draping begins with a muslin cloth. Like if we have the dress form, how draping begins, we just have the muslin cloth and we start draping on the dress form. Then muslin is blocked, ironed, basic landmarks marked before starting. We have a fabric, muslin cloth, then we prepare the fabric before going to drape. What we do, we just block the fabric, iron the fabric, we make all the basic markings, body landmarks, or the basic, like if we want to cut in the lengthwise or the crosswise, we do all that preparation before starting on the draping. Then draping helps to see the fit and fall of the garment at the first sight itself. Like when we for the first time we put the fabric on the dress form, we can see or we can visualize how the final product will come out. So it allows for easy experimentation with the neckline, collars, yoke, sleeve, etc. Like if we want to do some types of pleatings and gathers together on the sleeve, we can do it with the draping method. So these are the basic features of the draping. Then the second unit or the second part is the methods or tools for the pattern making. So when we have discussed the pattern making, methods of pattern making, what are different features for the different types of pattern making, so there are some tools and terminologies which you should remember while doing that pattern making thing. So the first, some terminologies, if you are studying a fashion design or you want to become a designer, you should know the technical terms. So the terminologies used in pattern making are, first is the pattern making, we have discussed so much about that just now. Then the drafting and the flat pattern, what is the basic difference between the flat pattern and the drafting methods, we have discussed. Then the draping we discussed just now. Muslin cloth, you have seen it is a thin fabric which is made of cotton, so it is used for the pattern development. Selvage is the edge of the fabric, grain is the direction of the fabric we are using, lengthwise grain we have discussed, crosswise grain we have discussed, and the bias grain. So these are the basic terminologies we use in pattern making. Then there are some tools for the pattern making. We use the measuring tape, we use the straight pins, style tapes, we use the dress form, tracing wheel to trace the design on the fabric or the measurement on the fabric. Then we use the notches to do the marking on the fabric, paper cutter, glue stick, paper cutter, scissor. We have the pressing equipments, pattern making papers, carbon and muslin. So these are some of the important tools which is used for the pattern making or when we are going for the garment construction. So learners, these some information was I discussed with you about the methods of pattern making and tools for pattern making. Hope this session was beneficial for you. Thank you.